I was very blessed because my first public outing was with the Rolling Stones. It ended up that my grimoire, which I had made for a friend's film, Elias Merritt was making a film called Shadow of the Vampire with John Malkovich and Willem Dafoe, and he called me and he said, could you make a grimoire? Now a grimoire is a book of ancient spells, and in the same way as with my tarot, I was blessed with being given permission to work in a very arcane direction, because the tarot came about from a friend, Edwin Steinbrecher, saying, could I use some of your drawings for representing archetypes? And I said, well, why don't I draw them? How hard could it be? So after that, 17 years passed, and I bled the tarot into existence. So when I say I think it has something to offer, I think it does have something to offer. But back to the grimoire ended up not being in the film. As we all know, the film business, often you end up on the cutting room floor, or wish you had. So it came full circle, and it ended up with Keith Richards. It was projected on their Bigger Bang tour, 120 by 80 feet. Keith Richards did his acoustic solo in the middle of this magical grimoire. So that was the first outing of this work, and it has done a very good job of staying private. But it has now, and I'd love to say it was everything I did to keep it private, but it's really amazing how we'd like to say reality is something that we can program and all we have to do is dominate it and do as we say, but we realize that's erroneous, that reality has no interest in our assumptions about her and is waiting for us to go, okay, I don't know. At that point, something happens, and it seems as though we start to go on the path that starts to unfold. And so this is part of an unfolding path. I'm very delighted because many of you, some of you have come to my studio, and those that haven't should leave their names and come to my studio, because my studio is a painted entity. It began on 9/11, actually the day after 9/11, a language erupted called the Watcher language, and I started to follow this language like a jazz riff. And as I did, it grew over the floors, finally covering the couch, the chairs, the books, the ceiling. So as this madness, which was actually just exuberant storytelling, took place, it finally reached a critical mass. The room is now completed. Interestingly enough, it tracked with George Bush. So I have to say thank you to the dark years, because had this panic, this absolute terror that we weren't going to pull out of the nosedive, not taken my imagination, I probably would not have gotten up every morning and said, well, as the ship's going down, I have to at least leave a message in a bottle of why I love being human, why I love my wife and my family and my friends, and still found the desire to say yes, even as the world kept saying, be afraid, be very afraid. So I took the fear, I transmuted it, it became a living work of art, and this living work of art now is really moving into the next stage, which is to share it more with those who are interested, as I say, to move beyond belief and to start moving into the realms of inspiration and imagination. Because what we need to do, I believe deeply, is to nourish this inner curiosity, not to worry about believing or arriving at conclusions, but to really allow ourselves, once again, to understand that we're artists of consciousness. There's nothing to believe. What we're trying to do is to restore a more interesting version of who and what we are. And we can only do that by allowing ourselves or giving ourselves permission to say, yes, I like this way of being human better. And I was always very attracted to the Renaissance model of consciousness. Because in that model, it didn't say, oh, you've got to be the smartest guy in the room. You've got to know everything about everything. It said, no, the human mind, our experience here is so remarkable and so vast that certain questions have to be asked with geometry, some with mathematics, some with love, some with poetry, some with wine. Everything has to be asked in the language that it is actually addressing us in. To be human is not to be a line of thought. It is to be a sphere of being. And that's really what a lot of this has brought me back to. The codex images that you'll see on the wall, and many of the other images, and hopefully the titles will be evocative for you. But these have been ways that I have asked with my imagination and creativity the questions that can't be known as a thing in themselves, but they've taught me, basically, that if we think about Mozart or we think about Beethoven, the interesting questions are never asked, are they true or are they false? We say, do they move us? do they inspire us? And that's really what I've tried to do with my work. And so as you look around, please be inspired, and please look at my book, Tarot Revision, and the cards, and also at another book that's here called Adam Reborn and Eve Restored. Because as delighted as I was with the tarot, and as much as I thought that would probably be it, that was actually just the beginning of the journey. Because what has happened is that the studio that I told you about, in working on that, led to a revisioning of Genesis. Because I don't know about you, but part of my problem has always been, in terms of the human condition, that the basic story about who and what we are as male and female has truly been daunted with an unfortunate version where female is inferior to male, and it has done and wreaked havoc on the human psyche. And so the only way I felt that you can actually address that, and again, it wasn't the conceit. I never thought I would write Adam Reborn and Eve Restored, but because of this work and this seed idea, an exuberance has occurred where this story, Adam Reborn and Eve Restored, has come out. And I really think it's quite beautiful. It's about the atomization of universal Adam. His mind becomes atomized, and he becomes lost in the vastness of his own creation. And therefore Sophia, the great mother, begins to take pity upon Adam being crushed under the burdens of time's complexity and being separated from source, and so she begins to cry. And from her tears, the Immaculate Eve arises into each of Adam's worlds to remind him of home, to remind him of paradise. But because of the fear of the original atomization, he can no longer see her. He can no longer see his beloved. And so it goes through from there. But it's quite a good story and something that I feel is very therapeutic and healing. So that's it. Do you have any questions? Or have I rambled on and...
I just wanted to say, this is sort of a commercial here, I guess, but these prints are not, these are $45, so I don't think they're marked up there. So all of them, they're just without that up framed are $45. And then the book is on sale for $25.
Oh yes, actually I'm very proud of this. This is the first run, first edition, and I had made a smaller reader's copy of this, and I talked to my friend who's also my publisher, and he said, you know, we have these beautiful original editions, why don't we sell them for less? And so this at $25 is not breaking even on the cost. So it's something that really has to do with the desire to get it out there. So if you have or are thinking about gifts or gifting yourself, please do. But any questions, anything? Yeah.
Well, if we have you here in this blessed moment and can ask you questions, yes. I want to take advantage. Good. Tell us something about your creative process. When you start painting, do you, like some artists, see the whole thing in front of you? Or do you start at that space and see where it wants to go and where it wants to grow? The creative process, actually, the origin of it, when you start, do you already have a picture, or do you just pick the first color and take it from there? Please tell us about that.
No, it's a wonderful question, because I find that a lot of, you know, with the art, people think of it as visionary. And I always point out quickly that the last part of the visionary process is optical. It's in the eyes. It's not what you see. The visionary is not that sense of, oh, I've seen it, now I'm going to translate what I've seen. And usually when we try to do that, we find that it's an image of somewhere or something, but it doesn't move us because the process has not been there. It's like taking a picture of somewhere. And so what interests me is I don't have a vision. As a matter of fact, when I was working on the tarot, I reached a point where, because this is 17 years, 15 years into it, you get into the begging thing. Can't I just see it? Can't I just look into the darkness? I mean, this is on some level already created, right? I mean, I was using all the logic of you know, multidimensionality. And I got very strongly, was absolutely yes and no. That the reason why we don't see it, and why I don't see it, when I work, I really work in when you look at skins. I work in membranes. I work in a way, rhythmic passages that really, I sometimes like in the painting process, almost as though I'm working with something in deep viscous oil that I can't quite see, and I'm changing and I'm looking, and as I'm turning it, I start to catch an idea, a bit like advanced cloud reading.